Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is the islands of the world. Wow. And so you think to yourself, okay, everybody knows what an island is, a land completely surrounded by water. But think again, because according to geographers, if that land surrounded by water is so large, then it's considered a land mass. And there are 4 land masses in the world. The largest by far is Afro-Eurasia, Africa, Europe, and Asia. Just imagine 84 million square kilometers. So that's considered a land mass. And of course, has most of the largest population, most people, the people in the world. And the second would be the Americas, so-called the Americas. Cool, funny. North and South America, second land mass, about half that size, about 42 million square miles. The third is Antarctica. You don't think of Antarctica very much, right? The bottom of the world, not too many, obviously a very harsh, well, the most harsh environment on Earth, but it's a land mass. And the fourth is Australia. There are these 4 great land masses. Australia, the only country which is also a continent and a land mass. And apparently, you look at Australia, you think, oh, that's an island, and geographers say no, it's too big. It's too big to be an island. That's kind of funny. Australia reminds me of Russia. You know, the country which is European, Asian, and one time was American, but now it's just European and Asian. Okay, so that after those 4 land masses, now we'll start talking about the islands of the world, and we'll start in northern Canada, and then go around the world from there. Northern Canada is there's a group of it's an archipelago, basically an Arctic archipelago. Then very very harsh environment, and there's some very large islands up there. In fact, Baffin Island is the fifth largest island in the world. There are 11,000 people there. Yes, it's kind of surprising. I did a little research. Polar bears, caribou, wolves, and foxes, among other animals. So it's a huge island in the far north. And then a couple of the other very large Canadian Arctic islands. You've got Victoria Island, a little farther north, only 2,000 people. There's Caribou. And then Ellesmere, way far north, only 190 people. And I don't know if there's any animals. They have a few insects like bumblebees and moths, which must hibernate in the winter. So these great, the Canadian Arctic archipelago. Now moving south, in Canada, you have Newfoundland, which is a pretty big island off the coast of Canada. Newfoundland is one of the big islands, the 16th largest island in the world, and it was the derivation of the name, from Newfoundland, European perspective. And then one of the most interesting islands is Prince Edward Island in the St. Lawrence, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and made famous by the fictional character Anne of Green Gables. There's like 10 books. Lucy Maud Montgomery, who wrote these wonderful books and created this very fictional character, the power of fiction and creativity. Anne of Green Gables, this girl who was an orphan, and then but had a fighting spirit and was adopted by an older sister and brother. And Anne of Green Gables had this wonderful fighting spirit, positive attitude despite life's hardships. What's interesting is she became very popular in Japan after the Second World War, when the Japanese were so demoralized by the war and defeat in the war and so forth. She became a hero in Japan. A lot of Japanese tourists come to Prince Edward Island because of this fictional character. Very interesting. Now moving south, there's Bermuda, British. What's one of the small few remaining areas, parts of the old British Empire. It's a tourist spot off the coast of the U.S. It's not kind of far north, so it doesn't have the. If you go there in winter, it might be a little bit cool. And of course, the Bermuda Triangle, which is associated with Bermuda, where the supposedly ships have disappeared. Now moving south, going back north a little bit into the U.S. in Lake Erie, I have to give a little promotion. We have islands in Lake Erie. Lake Erie Islands are pretty cool, and in the one of the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, and we have Kelly's Island, which is pretty over there in western Lake Erie, and Pelee Island, which is Canadian, and South Bass Island, which is, some people think of Put-in-Bay, which is the settlement there. And there are a few other smaller ones, so that's pretty cool. The Lake Erie Islands. Now moving south into the Caribbean, which has some very interesting, and actually that's our cover photo of the video. the Caribbean, and off the coast of Florida, the Bahamas, which some say, oh, it's not Caribbean because it's in the Atlantic, but I consider it Caribbean. These very small islands, archipelago off the coast of Florida, beautiful, and a real wonderful tourist spot. People go to visit. Tourists love going there. And then the big islands in the Caribbean, Cuba, south of the Bahamas, the old Spanish island, and then a strong American influence, and then and up till now, a communist country, and under the Fidel Castro dictatorship, now his brother Raul. To the east of Cuba, the island of Hispaniola. And Cuba, in fact, is one of the biggest islands. Well, I don't see it on my list here. Oh, 17th largest island. East of Cuba, Hispaniola. How big? Where's Hispaniola in my list? Okay, the 22nd. Well, it's kind of boring. Anyway, Hispaniola, which is one of the divided islands, along with Cyprus, Borneo, New Guinea, and Timor. And so these islands divided politically. The western part being Haiti, which was the second independent country in the Americas after the United States, where the African slaves and African descent population rebelled against France, became independent under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture. And still, actually, it's famously had a lot of hardships, struggling with dictatorships over the years, and a very bad economy. In the eastern part of Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, La República Dominicana, a lot of tremendous baseball players have come to the U.S. and played. They're really crazy about baseball, and they can play year-round in the Dominican Republic. To the east of the DR, Puerto Rico, again, actually an old Spanish colony, and then for a long time, and it's up till now, an American territory, and tremendous baseball players like Roberto Clemente. If I meet Puerto Ricans, I say, Viva Clemente, and they like that because he's a national hero, or an island hero in Puerto Rico. Now, the Caribbean another name is called the West Indies, and then the East Indies would be what's now Indonesia. So you have the two Indies, and I'm not sure what an Indies is, but are kind of related to American Indians. Now, the Caribbean is divided into two parts. The big islands in the west, the Greater Antilles, and then the eastern part, the Lesser Antilles, which are smaller islands. And after Puerto Rico, they bend down towards South America. And you have and some of these are still European colonies. I think Martinique is French, and you have St. Lucia, which I had a friend from St. Lucia. And moving down, the big one is all the way down towards South America, Trinidad and Tobago. They're made famous by these steel bands, where they have these. They took steel they make drums out of big. These big drums, oil drums, where they store petroleum, steel drums. So, they have a lot of in Trinidad, a lot of mostly African descent, also large Indian population from India, and in the Caribbean, and then some other places. I'm wearing this shirt, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Grand Turk Island. You think, what's the deal? Turk, what are Turks doing? And according to my research, on the Grand Turk Island, they have a cactus which has like a red blossom, a red part at the top. It reminded somebody of a Turkish sultan's cap, or the Turkish fez. These hats that would kind of go up. That they used to wear years ago. I don't think they wear them anymore. Then Grenada, off the coast in the Caribbean, another small island that U.S. invaded under Ronald Reagan because they had adopted the communist system back in the early 80s. So that's Caribbean. And now moving south all the way down in the southern Atlantic, the Falkland Islands, which are still British. And there was the war, the Argentine dictatorship to try to distract the people. They invaded the Falklands, 1982, and then it took the British fleet a month to sail, and they defeated the British. The British defeated the Argentines, and so actually, I had some Argentine students. They said, "How come the Falkland Islands shouldn't be British? Look how far away Great Britain is. It's right off our coast. It should be Argentine." And the thing is, the people are English-speaking, English descent, and they want to be a part of Great Britain. They're still a British colony. To the east, South Georgia Islands. Now moving up toward in the Atlantic, the Atlantic Ocean. St. Helena Island, where Napoleon Bonaparte spent the last 3 years of his life and really showed the nobility of his character. He lost power. He was a prisoner of the British, but he behaved with dignity. and he behaved with graciousness, and he showed good character and humility, and he was I was really impressed by that. I think that was the most interesting part of his life when he lost everything, and he really showed his nobility of character. Now moving north, off the coast of Africa, Sao Tome e Principe. E, I think, is Portuguese for and not a little island country. Now moving north in the Atlantic, you have like these different archipelagos, the Cape Verde Islands, the Azores and the Madeira Islands, which are still Portuguese, and the Canary Islands, which are Spanish. Right, now going up to the far north, Greenland, largest island in the world. Yeah, very interesting. Still, it's actually a colony, or it's ruled by Denmark. It's not independent. I think there's only 60,000 people population, and these are like, I believe, mostly Eskimo type, American Indian type people. In high school, we had an AFS student from Greenland. Too bad I was so immature I didn't make friends with her. It would have been interesting to learn about Greenland. And there's a wonderful book called The Greenlanders, I think by Jane Smiley. And there were these immigrants, maybe 900 years ago from Europe, and they had a tough time because the growing season's very short, long winters, and they had these, so they'd really have to try to work hard and cultivate as much crops and take care of their animals and to survive the winter. And they would have this Easter fast or Lenten fast, which because they're basically no food, so they have to be fasting. Sometimes their Lenten fasts would take them all the way to heaven. They would starve to death, and eventually they all died. Greenland. Down to the far north, in the Arctic, Spitsbergen, which is, I think, Norwegian, and there's a famous dog, the Spitz, and my wife Alice had Japanese Spitz dogs, which are, I think, partly connected to Spitsbergen. And now moving south in the North Atlantic, you have Great Britain, one of the largest islands in the world. Let's see, Great Britain, where is it? The 9th largest island in the world, of course, in the British Empire, England, Scotland, and Wales. So Great Britain, and off the coast of Scotland in the north, there's the Orkney Islands, a small group of islands, and they were actually in the novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Victor Frankenstein was making a female monster for the male monster to have a companion there in the Orkney Islands in a remote area, and then he decided, he didn't want to do it, so he destroyed the body, and the monster was looking through the windows, got very upset, and then eventually they pursued, and they killed Victor's wife, and then the end, the Victor was mad at pursuing the monster in the Arctic, and then the Victor died, and then the monster was, what am I going to? So he built a funeral pyre and burned himself to death in the Arctic. This is a very fascinating story by Mary Shelley. Now, okay, so then you have Ireland to the west, another big Ireland, another country. We have a lot of Irish Americans here. And then in the English Channel, the Channel Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, and Alderney, where my great grandfather was stationed in the British Army for a while, and way back in the 19th century before he married his great grandmother, and they moved to Canada. Now moving into the Mediterranean Sea, the Balearic Islands off the coast of Spain, the Mallorca, and Ibiza. And then the two big Italian islands, Sardinia and Sicily. Sicily made famous by organized crime, the mafia, these Sicilian immigrants who came. It's too bad they give the whole island a bad name, and immigrants to the U.S. And then Corsica, the French island, which Napoleon Bonaparte was from. And then the British called him the Corsican Devil because he was their opponent. And it's interesting, some of the most powerful people in history came from remote parts of their country. Like you'd think Corsica, which is a remote part of France. And here Napoleon became this tremendously powerful leader. And then Joseph Stalin was from Georgia, another remote part of the Soviet Union. And then Adolf Hitler was from Austria, German speaking, but not Germany. Interesting. And then in the Mediterranean, we also going to the Greek islands, and the big one is Crete, and there's Rhodes, so forth. And then in the Far East, in the Eastern Mediterranean, Cyprus, which is divided between the Turkish part and the Greek part. Yeah, I hope they're getting along better now. They had a lot of conflict before. The Greek part because conflict based on their countries. You had the old Byzantine Empire, and then it became the Ottoman Empire, and then there were bad feelings between Greeks and Turks, which affected the people of Cyprus. Okay, now let's see. Moving down into covered everything. Now moving down into the Indian Ocean, Madagascar, off the coast of southeastern Africa, considered an African island, and yeah, it's made famous in this Disney movie. Actually, during the Second World War, when the Nazi Germany, the powers that be there, they thought, they were anti-Jewish. They wanted to get rid of the Jewish people. Very unfortunate, because Jewish people are very talented. But anyway, that was their bad attitude. And of course, we know they had tried to kill them all in the Holocaust. But at one point, they talked about moving them all to an island, and they considered several islands, including Madagascar. I thought that would have been interesting if the Jews had all been moved to Madagascar, because I think Madagascar would be an amazing place today. So in the Indian Ocean, in the far south, Kerguelen. Ooh, very, very cold. Still a French island, and then you have the Seychelles, I think, off the coast of Africa, and then moving toward, let's see what else we're missing here, and Sri Lanka off the coast of India, which is formerly British Ceylon. Now moving east, we're getting into Southeast Asia, and this is really the island part of the world where you have some of the biggest islands in the world, in Indonesia specifically. You have there's Java, which we get the name of coffee comes from. Some people call it coffee, Java, and then let's see, New Guinea, which is a divided island in the far east of Indonesia, and the western part is Irian Jaya, part of Indonesia, and the eastern part is Papua New Guinea. Fascinating island in Papua New Guinea, which is an independent country, was formerly British and under Australian rule, now independent. And these are really interesting country where they were really living this simple life until the modern world intruded upon them, but tremendously intelligent, based on surviving in their environment through knowledge of the natural world and how to deal with that. A lot of horrific fighting in the Second World War between the U.S. and Australians and the Japanese in what's now Papua New Guinea. And then also, let's see, Borneo, another divided island. Huge island. In fact, Borneo is the third largest. New Guinea is the second largest. These are big islands. Borneo, divided between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. Very, very interesting. And then Sulawesi, which is really has an interesting shape. It has kind of like all these peninsulas. And, the Spice Islands, I think, the Moluccas. Right, interesting. And so into the Indonesian islands. Timor, another divided island. Timor in Indonesia. But now the East Timor's become independent because it was Portuguese, and they thought, we're different from the Dutch-ruled part. It's another divided island, Indonesia. Now moving north from Indonesia into the Philippines, right? With the two big islands in the far north, Luzon, and in the south, Mindanao, which is Muslim. Yeah, Muslim island, traditionally. And a lot of political problems in Mindanao because of foreign Muslims making trouble, bringing in weapons to try to have jihad, waging war, so-called holy war. And then between Luzon and Mindanao, the smaller Visayan islands like Negros and Leyte, where Douglas MacArthur returned to the Philippines, and smaller, different islands there, Leyte, Negros, Samar, and so forth. And moving north of the Philippines, Taiwan, off the coast of China, which is basically a Chinese island. Although the Taiwanese say, no, we're not Chinese, we're Taiwanese. And then moving north, the Japanese island, the big island of Honshu. And Honshu is one of the biggest. Honshu is the 7th biggest island in the world. We didn't mention Sumatra in Indonesia, also a big island. Honshu, which has the most of the population. North of Honshu, Hokkaido, and which doesn't have too many people. And they had the Hairy Ainu, or the original inhabitants, because the Japanese are Chinese descent. And they said the Hairy Ainu, I don't think they were back in the 70s. There was talk they were going to disappear. And the South, Shikoku and Kyushu, and they have actually, and then there's also smaller archipelagos, the Kuril Islands. And then north of Japan, Sakhalin Island, who I like that name, Sakhalin, in the Sea of Okhotsk, by the Kamchatka Peninsula. Yeah, and one time it was the Russians and the Japanese were fighting over Kamchatka. And then going to the far north, the Aleutian Islands, off the coast of Alaska, Alaskan Islands. Now going back down south, off the coast of southern Australia, Tasmania, Yeah, I think it was a cartoon character, the Tasmanian Devil. And then to the southeast, New Zealand, the two islands of New Zealand, kind of dull names, South Island and North Island. Well, North Island and South Island. And North Island's one. They're two of the two big. South Island's the 12th largest in the world, and North Island's 14th. And now and then moving to the Pacific Islands. All these we talked about. The three regions: Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. In Micronesia, Guam is very well known, and Saipan, a lot of fighting in the Second World War, and the Marshall Islands there. And in Melanesia, well, the Solomon Islands, named after King Solomon, the great king of Israel in ancient days. New Caledonia, Fiji, Tahiti, where they had the mutiny on the Bounty, where the Bounty came trying to transport breadfruit from Tahiti to the Caribbean, mostly Jamaica, for food for the African slaves there. And then the mutineers, they decided they may have had girlfriends in Tahiti, and they all settled on, they had mutinied against Captain Bligh, and then they decided, we can't, mutiny is a capital offense, so you'll have the death penalty back then, and so they said, we can't go back to Great Britain, so they settled in Pitcairn Island. People in Pitcairn Island still in the east, a little further east, pretty remote. They're descendants of mixed people of British and Tahitian ancestry. And then moving further east, Easter Island has these huge stone heads, which have really puzzled people, made people wonder about them. And then the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America, famous for these huge sea turtles. So what have we missed here? I think we're in pretty good shape. We didn't talk about Iceland off the coast of southeast of Ireland, or Greenland rather. Yeah, now let's see. Let me just check here. If you'll be patient with me. Cube Iceland. Okay, that's right. Yeah, so we're pretty good shape. So anyway, the islands of the world. This is just a brief introduction, and there's a lot more to learn, and it's all very interesting. So much history and nice places to visit, and it's nice to learn about these places, their history, and what's going on, how they're doing now, how they're getting along now. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and good luck with your own efforts in learning about learning. This is basically geography. Geography is a wonderful topic to really help us to understand the world better and the world we live in. So God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.